about pushing back because she went over?
No, but I think she's still in the room too, shaking hands and stuff, so there's a scene in there.
This is such a short panel, I feel like we should. And was that 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dave, you want to shut the doors? Oh, sorry. Okay, good morning. I'm Will Coley with Act for Media. I'm also an individual member of the Detention Watch Network, and I'll be your moderator this morning. And we have 4 great panelists this morning to talk about crimigration under Obama, pushing back against the immigration enforcement-only regime. We wanted to approach this topic from a lot of different angles. We're going to have some folks talk about what has happened since Obama has been in office dealing with immigration enforcement. We're going to have some folks who are talking about how the DREAM students have been getting involved and how it's intersecting with this issue. Also someone talking about their own experience on the ground level in Texas, and also giving a national perspective about the issue of secure communities and the 287G program. So I just thought we would start out this morning while people are still coming in to show you a clip from a video. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. This is a video that was made by the Sound Strike. I'm not sure if you know about them, but last night they had a concert in Los Angeles. It's a campaign by artists that are boycotting Arizona because of State Bill 1070. It's the racial profiling or show me your papers law, and which is due to go into effect next week, in less than a week, July 29th, if nothing changes. So this is a video that they made about what's happening on the ground in Arizona, and I thought it's a great video, and I'll just show a little bit of it just to get us going. So is that okay with y'all? Okay, so let me get this going. Sorry about our sound.
De la ley que según está en el fin de este mes que según que se va a hacer, pero y es el problema ahorita que estamos luchando para que no se haga.
Yo creo que no tiene mucha explicación. Aquí es un salirse de este estado.
Estoy ayudando aquí a Puente a resistir con esta ley. Estamos enseñando a las personas cuáles son sus derechos, si llegan a pararlos la policía, ellos qué pueden hacer para defenderse, qué no deben decir, qué deben decir.
Más que nada nuestra campaña es concientizar a la gente sobre que nos tenemos que unir más, organizarnos más.
Lo que yo me dediqué a hacer en las 2 últimas marchas fue buscar negocios para proveer comida. Vino mucha gente de otros estados.
I'm a student organizer. I'm part of the staff for Puente, Arizona. And what I do is I do a lot of student-based community work. I do a lot of recruitment work with the students, get a lot of the youth involved in what's happening in our community right now.
I work with the Puente movement. We developed a strategy to fight back against SB 1070. We've been working for the last 2 years against Sheriff Charles Pyle and the 287G program. So So what we've been doing is concentrating on developing bottom defense committees. We've developed in different strategies, whether it be through civic engagement, boycott, non-compliance, and even participating in the legal strategy to fight back against SB 1070.
Pues para mí es buena idea de que ellos no se presenten aquí en Arizona, porque aquí en Arizona pues que están en contra de toda la comunidad de los hispanos, y para mí está bien que ellos estén participando, de que no vengan para que no quede su dinero aquí en Arizona, que no lo usen.
Este es un país capitalista, ¿verdad? Entonces, para ellos es muy, muy importante la cuestión del dinero y de los negocios. Entonces, yo pienso y les doy el mensaje a estas personas artistas que quieren apoyar, que la presión de esa manera del boicot, para mí en lo particular es bastante buena. ¿Por qué? Porque es una manera de decir, nosotros no vamos a apoyar, nosotros no vamos a estar a favor de estas leyes que están haciendo, que están perjudicando más bien que beneficiar.
Todos ellos tienen que mirar qué tanto les va a afectar esta ley también a ellos, porque ellos piensan que solamente van a barrer las calles, pero no están mirando que las personas es la unión, y si siguen con esta ley, otras personas que están en otros estados van a mirar que los está afectando, ellos van a dejar de comprar, van a dejar de venir aquí a Arizona, van a dejar de traer dinero aquí a Arizona, porque lo que están haciendo no es correcto.
O que sí es necesario que se siga adelante con el boicot.
I hate to cut that off because I think it's a great video. But this video we want to show because it shows how the local community is organizing. They're asked to folks, other Americans, how they can support their work in Arizona. Of course, as you know, the Obama administration is filing a lawsuit against SB 1070. But even though mainly on the issue of the fact that immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility. But at the same time, the Obama administration has deported and prosecuted more immigrants actually than the Bush administration has in the same period of time. And so people are now talking about the carbon copy that the Obama administration has made of the Bush administration, and very little changes have been made. So to do that, I wanted to start out with talking with Manhuri Mohinder, who's with Breakthrough, and we were going to show a little bit of, did you want to say a little bit before we show the video? Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Madhuri. I'm a multimedia producer with Breakthrough. Breakthrough is a human rights organization, but our focus in the United States has largely been on immigration and racial justice. We've been sort of tracking the issue for many years, essentially since 9/11 happened, and since we really saw this sort of really a taking away of due process and many human rights violations that were being tolerated in the name of national security. We've produced a video game, Iced, Icon in Deportation. It's a free downloadable video game if anyone's interested. We've also done interactive websites. Homeland Guantánamo is one, where we're comparing detention centers in the United States that house immigrants really to what is happening outside the country in Guantánamo. And our latest campaign is Restore Fairness, which I'll be talking a little bit more about. Restore Fairness really came about as a response to the growing violations in the detention system and the increasing amount of deportations that were not only tearing apart families, but really violating due process on many levels. What I wanted to show was a little clip of a video so you get a little bit of a sense of what is happening within the system. What we see now, what we've all hoped for was that there would be a change under the Obama administration. Basically, there was a huge outcry within the immigration detention system because there were many deaths in detention and there were many violations. So within the Obama administration, there's been a movement to reform the system. We've been pushing for alternatives to detention because immigration detention is a civil violation. It is not a criminal violation. And yet people who are pushed into the system are treated pretty much like they're in the criminal justice system. They're made to wear uniforms. They have very strict timings to meet their lawyers, to meet their family members. most of them, we believe, are not a threat to society, nor are they a flight risk. And so really there's no need to necessarily house them in detention. So we've been pushing for much more alternatives. We also feel there need to be legally enforceable standards in detention because people cannot hold the government accountable for the kind of violations that are happening. So let me show you a quick clip of the video and then talk a little bit more.
Sandy died trying to do the right thing. She died because the American system failed her. A system we believed in. A system that needs fixing now.
Everybody in America, under our Constitution, is entitled to due process of law. There it is, and we've fallen short in the due process of law arena when it comes to the whole immigration system.
This land is your land. This land is my land. My sister was a legal permanent resident and lived here for nearly 33 years. In 2005, Sandy visited Barbados to show off her granddaughter. She was a child sole custodian. When she returned to this country, Sandy was detained for an old misdemeanor drug charge for which she hadn't even served any jail time. We told the ICE officer of my sister's medical condition. She had high blood pressure and high cholesterol. She had a bleeding fibroid. Despite all this, ICE determined that she needed to be detained.
Congress passed laws in 1996 to greatly restrict the discretionary authority of U.S. immigration judges. As a result of the amendments to the law, people whose lives in the United States were fundamentally productive and positive were not given an opportunity to remain here. In my judgment, that's not much of a due process investment in the system.
Before the 1996 law, more residents would have been able to have their cases come before the courts for the judge to use their discretion in determining how serious is this crime, how long ago did that crime occur. All of those factors are what the judges balance when they're exercising discretion, and the 1996 law has limited that discretion.
We need to have immigration reform that includes meaningful and expanded judicial discretion.
Sandy was taken to Port Monkey Regional Jail in Virginia. I know she complained constantly about not getting her medicine. My sister did everything she could to get out, but no one would do anything. Then I received a call saying my sister had died. There needs to be some transparency, some oversight, and ultimately some accountability.
The detention system, sort of the
So I'd encourage you, if you're interested more in Sandy's story or in some of the other stories that we've profiled, you can check out our website at restorefairness.org. As you can see, what we do is once every 2 months we release a story of an immigrant affected by really a lack of due process in the system. For example, our latest story, 2 months fight to stay together, is about a binational lesbian couple. Because they are unable to sponsor their same-sex partners, many of them are torn apart by deportation laws. And this is one such story, so it's very moving. We really try to look at people within the immigration system that are even more vulnerable because of their status. For example, an LGBT couple, We've done stories of transgender detainees who have been sexually abused in detention, HIV positive detainees who have not had access to medication. At one time, a pregnant woman, Juana Villegas, was taken into detention, and she ultimately had to give birth, taken to a hospital and kept shackled, which created a huge outcry. So, there are increasing stories of these violations, but I wanted to also talk about another issue that's happening, and that has really led to SB 1070. And that is the growing relationships between the local police or local law enforcement and immigration. We strongly stand against involving local law enforcement in immigration enforcement, largely because you lose the trust of the communities that you're meant to police. So often what happens is people are afraid to come to their police because they feel that they will face detention and deportation consequences. Now the administration, since all these laws, deportation laws, laws about these kind of relationships between police and immigration, these were all introduced around 1996. Interestingly enough, during the Clinton administration, there had been an Oklahoma bombing, and initially it was suspected that it was an immigrant who had done that bombing and turned out to be a U.S. citizen. But this led to a strong reaction, and so a lot of these very harsh laws were passed in '96. But it's only been since 9/11 that we've seen enforcement really skyrocket. And so what's happened with this kind of increasing engagements between the police and immigration enforcement is that you are seeing local communities, small communities spread out across the country. Sheriff Arpaio is the worst example of this, where increasingly people are having their rights violated, due process is being violated, they're not getting access to lawyers, they don't really have an idea what their rights are, and they're becoming increasingly afraid. And one manifestation of this, people said, what's the big deal? Let's just, it's not that big a deal. But now a final manifestation of this has become, Arizona's SB 1070. And that is actually spreading like wildfire. You have many other states considering introducing an Arizona SB 1070. And one of the worst repercussions of Arizona really is the racial profiling aspect. Communities of color are basically getting more and more threatened. Just very quickly, I'd encourage you to check out the website. My time is up, but there are take actions, but there's also a blog. We report on the blog every day, and we look at really what's going on within the immigration landscape. So, it's a great space to see what's happening, and keep checking in.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Next, I thought I would have Yahaira talk about her work. Yahaira is the founder and coordinator for the Kansas and Missouri Dream Alliance, and she was involved with an action that actually happened in Tucson in May, right? Where they did a sit-in in Senator McCain's office and put themselves, it was probably one of the first civil disobedient acts that we've seen where people who are undocumented have put themselves in the line of, or in jeopardy of being deported to push for immigration reform. So we're excited to have her here today. I know that Nancy Pelosi talked about the DREAM Act, so I don't know if you want to mention anything about that. So you know that issue. But and I found some photos, so I can show some photos while you're talking. So I can tell you about that.
That's great.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience?
Okay, well, like Will said, my name is Yahaira, and I'm a youth organizer in Kansas City, and we do work on both sides of the state line, which actually brings an interesting, I would say, factor into our organizing, just because sometimes we think that states and how, for example, they work is on a basis that they only affect the people that live within those states. And sometimes, for example, Arizona may seem like it's a far-off place, like it doesn't have anything to do with some people, but in Kansas City, those kinds of issues are really highlighted just because we do so much across state line work. I think the important connection with our city and the work that we do is that Chris Kobach, who is one of the authors of SB 1070 actually teaches at one of the universities in Kansas City, the University of Missouri. And he is also running for Secretary of State in Kansas. So we are very active in fighting against the things that he teaches, the things that he pushes for, but we also fight every year to make sure we have in-state tuition in Kansas, that it doesn't get taken away, and we fight to try to get undocumented students to have the ability to go to higher education institutions in Missouri, because as law currently stands, undocumented youth cannot attend public universities in the state of Missouri. And all of that obviously is connected. I think it's really important that we don't forget that what one state does or what one person does in one state affects the whole of the country. I think these pictures that Will has found and is showing really demonstrate a difference in thought, in action, and in organizing that young people have come to, right? We never really saw this kind of just being out front and vocal and bold and really honestly fearless and just, you know, it's utter strength. And it's an honor to work with them and to be part of the youth movement. But there's more things that we worry about than just the DREAM Act. Yes, that's our main focus, but everything else that has to do with the immigration system affects us. Things like driver's license checkpoints, which we have a lot in Kansas and Missouri, and I know that happen in other states, where supposedly they are set up to make sure people have licenses, are registered, and have insurance, those kinds of things. And really, how do they affect their undocumented community? Because I've seen these checkpoints set up under bridges or near bridges, and you have big buses, and you have immigration agents that are waiting for people there. And people think, oh, I thought that was a good thing. I didn't know that was a problem. And really the people that they're catching in these registration and driver's license checkpoints are people who are just coming or going to work or trying to take their children to school or trying to get to school themselves. And that's something that we hadn't, or at least I hadn't seen before, and that I've noticed that is rising. Additionally, I really want to highlight and connect Arizona back in with what we're seeing as far as criminalizing our undocumented people. I don't know if perhaps everybody is familiar with the Streamline Project, Operation Streamline as it's known, and that's something that happens in border states and something that I was able to actually see when I went to Tucson, which is a place where basically they bring in anywhere between 60 to 80 undocumented people that have been caught crossing the border. They bring them in chains to the courtroom. There is a room, the courtroom is full of lawyers, that's all. Very few family members, very few community members. It's just 30 to 40 lawyers, 60 to 80 people being processed 10 at a time, chained, hand to feet. So every time that they move, every time that they try to adjust the position that they're sitting in, all you hear is the sound of the chains. That's all that sticks with you. And people don't know that that's happening. We are criminalizing people that are crossing the border on their first time, sending them back, humiliating them, taking away their humanity by putting them through this situation. And the logic is that if you criminalize people and send them back, that they won't return. And obviously that's, not the case. That's not the solution to our problem. And additionally, in border states, you're seeing what is called a funnel effect. With things like the border wall going up, we are seeing places that are hospitable, that are obviously more secured. And so the only places for people to cross are the most inhospitable areas of our border. And that increases deaths in the desert. And the logic behind that as well is that you will decrease immigration by basically people dying in the journey. And that's not a humane way to address our immigration issue. That is not an actual solution because it just addresses one concern and it addresses it inhumanely. And as an undocumented youth movement, we have taken the stance that we need to work for an incremental change. While we do work for comprehensive immigration reform, we have in the last 9 years of working for the DREAM Act become strategists, political analysts, researchers, media gurus, and it's a position that is very well thought out. Perhaps not everybody agrees, but we have to start somewhere. And these young people are smart, are driven, we're passionate, and we're going to continue to work until we get the change that we want, and that doesn't stop at the DREAM Act. And so I think that's just a very important point to highlight. And I will do that.
Next, I want to introduce Vince Warren, who is with the Center for Constitutional Rights, based in New York. And I'm going to pull up a website. CCR was instrumental in uncovering the truth, right? Created this website just this spring about secure communities and police and ICE collaboration. And it's a great resource, and a lot of different groups worked on it, but CCR was really the lead on it. The wireless here is just, I shouldn't say that on a live feed. Netroots is wonderful. So anyway, I'll let Vince talk while I pull this up. But if you want to talk, and I just want to remind people that if you're tweeting, to use Stop ICE and N10 so that we can get this conversation into the broader discussion at Netroots. And we really appreciate you putting nuggets or pieces of information you're hearing today on Twitter so that other people can see it. So go ahead.
Thanks, Will. Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing?
All right.
Good. David, you're going to have to give me the time because I'm all fired up after Midori and Henry were speaking. I wanted to talk a little bit about what the criminalization of immigration is, just from a partial legal perspective. I will try to not make this for lawyers only because then everybody will run screaming from the room. But as Midori mentioned earlier, we have an immigration system that is essentially a civil system. Civil in the sense of not being criminal, not necessarily in terms of being just and humane. And in a civil system, and especially in this civil system, there are certain hallmarks that are really important. One is that your rights in a civil context are a little bit less strong than they would be in a criminal context, because when you're detained in immigration detention, from a legal perspective, you're not being detained for punitive purposes, to punish you for something that you've done. You're being detained in order to process whether you are here in the country legally or not, and to facilitate deportation if it looks like you're a flight risk or not. The other important thing to realize is that in the immigration context, the hammer, the real power, comes at the back end of that system. It's the deportation, the removal power that the federal government has. In the criminal system, it's a little bit different. In the criminal system, you have a right to a lawyer if you're charged with a felony or misdemeanor. You do not have a right to a lawyer in an immigration context, by the way. The power in the criminal system happens a lot in the front end. So, for example, if a police officer, if you're walking down the street and the police officer has a reasonable cause to believe that you've committed a crime, you can be stopped and detained and questioned. And then if he or she feels that there's more there and there's more evidence, you can be detained and arrested and then put before a criminal process. But that is a tremendous power that the police have in the front end of the system. And the only thing that protects us from being randomly detained for no reason or at the whim of a mean or evil or just a stupid police officer is our due process rights and our rights under the 14th Amendment if we are people of color, for example, or for other reasons. Now, the criminalization of immigration is the merging of those two systems. And what it does is it takes the worst aspects of each and combines them to completely disempower the person who was being detained. So, for example, the criminal aspects, and the Arizona SB 1070 laws is a classic example of this. And I also want to throw out, and I think people here would agree with me, that while it is certainly the most current and certainly the most egregious state law that we are looking at right now, it is by far not an anomaly. This is not an isolated incident that once this case is over in Arizona, that we can wash our hands and we don't have to worry about it. But here's a little bit how it works. In SB 1070, as you know, it mandates police officers to ask people for their papers. It literally, it's the Gestapo law, right? Show me your papers. What's interesting about it is, and problematic, is that it combines the criminal law with that aspect of immigration law, so that you can be stopped for having an overgrown law, for whatever is a summonsable offense, for jaywalking, for public intoxication, for carrying an open beer can, for riding on the wrong side in the wrong lane. Like the things that people around here do, and that certainly are not criminal offenses that rise to the level of making anybody scared for their lives, but these can be the pretext through which a stop that a police officer can then demand your papers. The other part of why this is really problematic is then once you are detained, and while you, in the criminal context, and while you normally would have the due process rights of the criminal context, you then are denied the ability to essentially challenge your information being sent over to the immigration authorities. And so what that means practically is if you just had a criminal case and you got arrested for a bullshit reason, you would have access to a lawyer, you would be able to argue that this is not true, this is bullshit, and the judge would dismiss your case. In this SB 1070, by the time you don't even get to a courtroom before the government has passed on this information to the immigration authorities. So even if your case is kicked because it's cracked, you are still then in the database, and you can very easily be turned over to the immigration detention system, and that's where the deep end of that system is. They've got you, and it is essentially a way of disappearing people for no reason at all. So that's essentially what we are all here to talk about, and I just want to echo a couple of things that were brought up that I think are very important. One, an issue that Maduri brought up was that while this stems back from 1996 under the Clinton administration with a law called IRA, that we've seen the explosion of these types of sentiments since September 11th. And we would be remiss if we didn't recognize the link between the government's inability to keep us safe from terrorism and overreacting to those type of situations, and the connections that they're trying to make with respect to immigration. Every single talking point that you will hear from sheriffs, from jailers, from ICE officials will talk about public safety. They will try to frame this as if these are the type of programs that are keeping the public safe, and it is simply not true. I want to talk a little bit about the Secure Communities program, which is one aspect of that, and it is probably one of the, I guess these types of programs are always ill-named, but this one is particularly ill-named because it has nothing to do with communities, and it has nothing to do with keeping us safe. The Secure Communities program is right now operating in about 437 jurisdictions in 24 states. And what that does is once you are arrested and brought into the criminal system just to be detained, your information is sent to immigration authorities. Now what's problematic about that? People will say, well, if you've committed a crime, and if you are here, then the government should be able to determine whether you're here legally or not. Here's the problem. The problem is that it turns the presumption of innocence completely on its head. Just because you are arrested, and if you don't know this, take it from me, just because you are arrested doesn't mean that you are guilty of anything. And so if the government is then taking an arrest and a detention and then putting your name through the system, it is essentially saying that it's going to determine if you're not guilty of the crime that you've been accused of, they're going to find something on you. It turns the innocence on its head. So you go into that system essentially being presumed guilty, and that the databases are trying to find ways to keep you into the system. That's the huge, huge problem. The Center for Constitutional Rights, the National Day Laborers Networking Organization, and other folks have filed a case this spring challenging, or asking, it was a Freedom of Information Act case that is requesting information on this Secure Communities program. Now, why are we filing a FOIA case on this? Well, because we know that by 2013, that the federal government wants this program to run in every single jail in the country. Every single jail in the country. As the sister was telling us on the video, that the key aspects to any of these types of programs from the government We need to have transparency and we need to have accountability. So from the transparency perspective, the government is certainly not telling us how this is operating. They're certainly not telling us how successful this is being. They're certainly not telling us if they're capturing the right people. So we were asking the government for this information nationally to be able to pull together the information so that we can determine, as people in the United States that are the watchdogs of this system, whether it is who it is capturing, how it is capturing them, and what can be done about it. My time is running out, and I'm all fired up, as I said. But I wanted to just address the question of racial profiling, which was touched on earlier. This is extremely, extremely important. The Center for Constitutional Rights, in addition to this case, we have one of the largest racial profiling cases against the New York City Police Department, where just incidentally, they stop and frisk over 500,000 people, black and brown predominantly, a year, and they don't really seem to care about it. But what is racial profiling and why is that bad and why does it play into SB 1070 and into secure communities? The idea of due process in the 14th Amendment is that the police, in particular, can only have an interaction with you if there is a reasonable suspicion that you've done something wrong. So they can't stop you because you're black or you're brown or you're Asian or whatever, and they think that you might have done something wrong, just in the criminal context. That's clear. What happens in secure communities is that there's an added layer, and especially in 1070, where the police officers are trying to figure out whether you are undocumented or not, based upon how you present yourself walking down the street. Now, how does one do that? How does one do that? Well, it's clear. If you are Mexican, or if you look like you're Mexican, or if you look like you're Jamaican, or you look like you're Cuban or Dominican, they're going to stop you. That is clearly illegal, and that's how it happens. And the last thing I want to say on this, which is really problematic, is that when you combine the criminal and the immigration, even when you go to court and they say there is nothing that you've done wrong, you've been released, your case is dismissed, your record is expunged, the immigration officials still have you. So again, that's how this stuff plays together. So they use the criminal hook to get you in, and even when it's crap, they still hold you on the immigration piece. Last thing I want to say is there have been some reforms that have been, alleged reforms that have been proposed by ICE officials. There was a June 30th memo that came out from the Assistant Secretary from ICE, which I can talk about a little bit later. But what they are trying to do, the federal government, is they're trying to make this a kinder and more gentler immigration procedure, and it's not reforming the system. What President Obama and the administration need to do is they need to declare a moratorium on all of these procedures. They need to defeat 1070. They need to stop the Secure Communities program. They need to stop 287G. They need to stop the Criminal Aliens program. And at the very least, they need to declare a moratorium until there is more comprehensive federal legislation. That's what they need. So as you're tweeting and as you're talking with your folks about this, what I think all of us on this panel would really urge you to do is to push the Obama administration to put their money where their rhetoric is in terms of humanity and in terms of how people are treated. They need to stop these programs. They need to stop pandering to the right. They need to stop pandering on national security. They need to recognize that racial profiling is happening and they're enabling it through their inaction. And thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And next, I wanted to introduce Edmundo Rocha, who is, I call him XP, that's how I know you. And Edmundo is going to talk a little bit about sort of a local perspective from Texas about a little bit about what happened with the D. Don Hoto Detention Center, maybe some more stuff about what's happening in South Texas, dealing with immigration enforcement. So that'd be great.
Hello, morning. My name is Edmundo Rocha, and I'm from San Antonio. And when I began blogging, I've been basically looking at the issue since 2004. And to be honest with you, when I started blogging, I did it as wanting to address Hispanic, issues. But because of the immigration issue, we have, it has kind of transformed being, such as myself, a Mexican American, into being, the lines have been blurred into being an immigrant. And so I already knew that this was already going to come about. And what I would like to thank, basically everything that everybody was talking about is summarized, in Texas. I know everybody's been focusing on Arizona, and I usually comment to my friends from Arizona, it's like, are you guys trying to out Texas? Because, in Texas, the number of detention centers we have the most detention centers than any other state. And in talking about Operation Streamline, since it began in 2005, in Texas alone, basically 135,000 immigrants have been detained and now have a criminal record. So now they're not going to be looked at as civil, as Vince was saying. Now they have a criminal record, and because of that, the Homeland Security and ICE are now allowed to believe that. I mean, that's why, I know everybody focuses, but in Texas, we have our own problems. I mean, we were talking about Dunn Huddle. Now, at first, it used to be one of the two detention centers that actually housed children, families. Since a group of us, very small, not very large, would go out there every month and start protesting. Once Obama was elected, one good thing was that ICE had decided that they weren't going to house children. However, that does not mean that there aren't any problems going on. In fact, there are many problems going on within our detention centers in Texas alone. We're talking about, in 2007, women are sexually abused in these detention centers that don't get as much media attention as possible. What we do see, and what we always do see within the media, is for example, just recently in Falcon Lake on the border were the cartels. And so basically the perception is they're criminals. They're here, they did something wrong, send them in there. But when you're, the problem, but when they're in there, there have been reports that, people have been beaten up to submission. Just recently, and then was later deported. In 2010, in the Port Isabel Detention Center, another guard just received 3 years for sexual assault of immigrants. And these are, there are not that many. In fact, the Amnesty International had gone to another detention center, had received, was getting reports, and the next day they maximum security, just for a speeding ticket. That is, when people talk about illegal, my first thing that I start telling people is like, well, did you break a speeding, did you speed, did you jaywalk, did you do any of that? And it's like, well, yeah, then you're should be considered illegal. And, you know, and the thing is that people really don't see that, because what we do see on the news, and especially in my city in San Antonio, are drug cartels, the murders, you know, the rapes that have happened. But what is not reported, because there have been increases of, you know, that not just the Obama administration, but also the Bush, increasing Border Patrol. Just recently, Obama's about to send the National Guard in there. If you talk to from the perception, you would say, well, yeah, you need this, you know, my God, there's all this violence that is going on in Mexico, especially in Ciudad Juarez. However, on the border cities, what these actions do, they choke them economically, because everybody's afraid to go to these border cities. Their economies get choked. When one of the complaints that I have spoke to, who is the chair of the Chamber of Commerce in Zapata, Texas, his complaints are that when you start declaring this war, this border war, what you see and what you think is, you know, Iraq, Afghanistan, you know, and what happens is that people are going to you know, stay away. So what is actually being created is basically a demilitarized zone. You know, it's a harsh term to use, but that's how some of them feel. Because once you enter, you can't. It doesn't feel like you're part of Texas anymore. You really do feel that you are going into this area, this zone of indifference, that you don't know if you're going to be able to come out, because depending on how heightened the immigration issue is, and I can speak out of my own experience, is that Border Patrol get very itchy finger to it. I mean, they really do. If you don't answer them very correctly, these are our, you know, these are our
we've been talking about Arizona a lot, and I mentioned that July 29th, the law is set to come into effect if there's no injunction issued. But, so unfortunately, some of the folks that, from the activists in Arizona were unable to join us. They've been doing actions every day for the last month. But I did get Opal Tometi, who is, does communication.
What's going on in Arizona. What's going on, and talk about Arizona, talk about the injustice, and talk about the humanitarian crisis that's already there, and the crisis that SB 1070 is sure to throw us into.
I want to mention I have a handout from the National Network for Immigrant and Refugee Rights about what you issues, particularly on detention, and we're preparing for the anniversary of proposed reforms that the Obama administration is going to make. And the first week of August is going to be the Dignity Not Detention Week of Action. So I've got a little flyer about it here. We're working on a report card to actually rate how ICE has or has not made any reforms to the system. So I'm going to pass these around. Citizen Orange.
And I actually, there was something that I did want to additionally mention that I had forgotten, and sometimes all of us forget, is how our immigration policy affects our Native communities. If there is anything that I learned while being in Arizona, I learned and I realized that we forget about our Native communities. We don't realize and we are not aware of how these policies affect them. I had an opportunity to speak firsthand with people from the Tohono O'odham Nation, and they're a nation that migrate from Arizona to Mexico, and they are settled on both sides of the border. And these policies really, really affect the way that their communities move, their communities interact and live. And it's very, very important to keep that in mind, because by criminalizing undocumented people, we are also criminalizing our Native populations, and that should not be acceptable. That should not be the case.
Great, thank you. So I want to open up to questions. I know we're passing around paper now, but does anybody, and we'll repeat the questions for the live feed. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Barbara Laura. I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, and I wanted to tell a success story and also ask a question about secure communities. We were able actually to turn back secure communities in the D.C., in Washington, D.C. Our police chief had signed a memorandum with ICE to implement secure communities. We've got together, we involved city council, and at the last council hearing, police representatives that they decided to hold renewal with ICE. So we're excited about that, and it can be turned back. One of the questions that I have is it going to be mandatory to implement secure communities in 2013? Because that was one of the questions that came out of someone, I know these are the hearings, okay, it might not be mandatory, I know that's the goal, but communities really have to sign on to this.
Just to repeat the question for people who are watching on the live feed, the question was about whether or not secure communities will be mandatory in 2013. That was the question. Anybody want to answer that?
Sure, yeah, it's a great question. And I think the answer is likely yes, but I think the ICE officials are trying to step away from that. The thing about secure communities is that these are agreements that are entered into at the state level, so they're not entered in even at the local level. So it's what the governor and what the entity in the state and the federal government agreed to. Once that's, and it's not clear at all whether localities have any input in that whatsoever. And once the state agrees to it, it appears that it is absolutely mandatory for the information that then localities collect to be sent to ICE officials. At the hearing, I believe it was, there was a statement by officials that said, well, no, it's not mandatory to do, but I can't understand any reason why any local official would not want to do that. I think it is likely to be mandatory. It's possible that it can be written in the guidelines somewhere to make an opt-out strategy, but as far as I know, in my reading, there is no opt-out strategy whatsoever.
Yes, any question? Sorry, did anybody else want to comment on that?
I'm just wondering if with the secure communities, is that going to affect anything like the welfare agencies sharing information. Are they going to include that in any way with sharing information and innovation?
So the question was whether or not welfare agencies and I guess other government services are going to share information. Just a minute, I don't know if you heard about what happened in Utah last week. Do you want to say something about that?
The thing about that is, and we could go back to the 1996 law, when it first, deemed that undocumented citizens couldn't get health care. And then, paralleling to Utah, the thing about public administration, they run on their own. And these are people that are not elected. And so what happens is that you could have, just like I was speaking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she was telling me that, the people in ICE from higher up, they're, basically they're nice. But once you get down to the states, they're acting as, as the passive, administration. So basically, it just depends. I mean, you could have someone who totally hates, undocumented and they'll use it, or you have someone who has a caring heart.
And I think it's really important to know, I give all the credit to the people that taught me this in Arizona, is that even if that is not happening through secure communities, that is happening through other bills and other measures. If people want to pass them, they will try to pass them. And Arizona really has seen that a lot. And making sure that people have documents to try to get social services, try to get food stamps for their documented children if they as parents are undocumented and then being denied and being referred to immigration, banning of ethnic studies, like different bills and measurements are passing that are harming our communities, and that's not always tied into secure communities.
Yeah, I don't know, the thing in Utah was that some state employees actually leaked a list of supposedly undocumented people to the press, and basically it was just people with Latino names, and I think the governor is now doing an investigation about that.
They implicated two state employees.
Right, but yeah. Sorry, did you?
I'm from Utah.
Oh, please.
And so it was excellent in the sense that there was a huge backlash. A lot of people started dancing around the issue of immigration, where they were very strongly enforcing and proposing to segregate laws through the state legislature. And so now I have a lot of Republicans calling a lot of people on our side saying, no, we don't want to be like racist, we want people to do it.
Wow. So it backfired on me. Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of ask, because everybody's talking about immigrants built the United States, right? And so literally, like, we're wondering, where does the actual beginning of this illegal immigration begin, right? And how do they find a point where it starts? Does it start in 1776 when the Constitution started, or
when the Pilgrims came.
is it when Christopher Columbus actually came illegally,
Yeah.
right? And then go back to then, and then I think we would actually have real immigration reform if we did go back to 1492.
Yeah, that's a good point. The question was, when does the concept of illegal immigration come about, and how deep is it into our history? That's a huge question, so I don't know, does anybody want to try to tackle
Well,
that?
it's very interesting. We did some messaging where we tried to look at the messaging of the United States is built on immigration. It's a country of immigrants, and we found that it actually doesn't work. Most people convince themselves that, well, my grandparents, when they came, they were legal, or the circumstances were different. So we found that the message that seems to resonate much deeper is the due process message. When you deny, due process to some people, or when you deny rights to some people, then you're putting all of our rights and all of our due process at risk. And that seems to resonate much deeper than this kind of historical argument, which is surprising given the deep history of immigration in the United States.
You had a question?
Yeah, really two short questions. I don't know if you saw the article in the group, online magazine 2 months ago, talking about the composition of people who attend immigration rallies, and why is it that we're not getting more, Asians and, my family that isn't making this, but, immigrants from other countries had rallies and being engaged on this issue, and were very equally affected by it. And secondly, going forward, have you seen more mobilization of people that are citizens and children of immigrants to vote? If these local races participation rates, especially of new immigrants, we see low rates of voting. And what can we do to engage people to let them know that we're not voting with family members, with mother might get deported because we didn't vote. Is that message all starting to resonate?
That's a very good question, and actually we were talking about that, about the panel. That's why we were interested in having Dream, represent from the Dream movement. Because I think there's some, I'll just say that I think there's something about immigration enforcement that isolates people and takes them from their communities. And as advocates, we've had a hard time trying to figure out how we can build the power of immigrant communities affected by this, because some folks, once they've been through and if they've managed to get out, it's something they want to put behind them. But I think that's why we're so excited about Dream students, getting involved with this issue, because we really do want more immigrant communities to see this as something. I think the most, in my opinion, the strongest advocacy I've seen around this has been family-based stuff. Like Families for Freedom in New York is doing great work, where they're organizing families that have been impacted by these unjust laws. And they've done really great work on this issue. You want to say anything about that?
I think as far as the work that young people are doing, that we're doing as a youth movement, is that we are aware of the importance of voting. And because we can vote, we actually make a very concerted effort to go out into our communities and make sure that people are able to vote, including our families, our friends. But that also gives us an opportunity to have a discussion of broader issues. And it's actually worked to bridge some communities. But as far as the first part of your question as to why are some other communities not coming out, like let's say Asians or Middle Easterns or people from the South Pacific, wherever they may come from, I think it's because the issue has become so demonized, and the repercussions for coming out are just so angry, and the rhetoric is just so illogical that some people are just afraid and they just feel that it's better to stay away and not put they themselves, but also their communities in there. But even with that, we're seeing communities come out, and that has been seen especially in the Arizona movement. We've had people come into Arizona, people from Korean communities, from other Asian communities. We had African Americans in March 29th march that happened in Arizona. And it's a matter of really bridging multiple issues and seeing that immigration does not stand by itself, and that it crosses boundaries, it crosses cultures and ethnicities.
Yeah, I don't know, is there a panel starting in here? When are they starting in 15 minutes? We started late, so I'm wondering if we can go a little late. Oh, okay. So y'all okay to go like another 10 minutes or something? Is that okay? Did you want to comment on that again? Or I think Vince had something. Did you want to?
I just wanted to say quickly in response to those two questions that we have to remember that the immigration laws that we're talking about, and this responds to the brother's point here, this is not a regulatory system, it's a repressive system. Right? It's a system that represses, it restricts, and it isolates. That's why we have it. That's what the goal is. So it shouldn't be surprising that people are reluctant, or that broad numbers of people are reluctant to engage in this. And what I think is important about this is that what we're underscoring in your question is the organizing strategies that are necessary to get broader groups of communities to come together around this. We have to remember that this is not, and with respect, I'm not a blogger myself, but I would just point out to you that when you ask the question, where is everybody and why are people not here, what you need to be doing is you need to be giving props and support to the organizers in the communities that are actually trying to get people there. I just wanted to throw that out.
And Josh, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say it's easy to say the good things that are happening and the many ways in which people are resisting. So there were 3 million people that marched in 06, but then there was 1.4 million that naturalized just in 2007, and then the Latino vote alone went from 7.5 million to 10 million in 08. And so there has been a huge politicization of the immigrant community very broadly, and it's not limited to the Latino immigrant community.
Well, one of the problems that usually doesn't get addressed is that we actually have a very complex it's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, idea about the border, because although we talk about border security and we need to enforce the border and all that, yet on the economic side, we're wanting to have a borderless economy. There's NAFTA, we're talking about CAFTA, and recently there was another free trade agreement. And so basically, all the, we're trying to say, do not, don't come over here, but at the same time we're saying, but let's have this free flow of, goods. And it's a system that both parties just, have kind of refused. That's why when it comes to resolving the immigration issue, it becomes a political football because, the businesses are going to come out in force, and that's why, when you start talking about limiting the number of workers and all that, they'll come out and say, stop.
More other questions?
What would you say are the pillars of comprehensive immigration reform, and how can we make sure that as we approach this, we don't, like I would say one of the important things would be civil rights protections. We don't wind up losing one of those important parts as a sacrifice, where we lost the public option, for example, in healthcare. Everybody, are we going to be satisfied with 75%? That's all we can do right now. And so instead, we wind up with, a path to citizenship and all these new rules that would satisfy people who would like to have 1070 be the comprehensive law of the land. And then we wind up getting nothing.
Yeah, the question was about comprehensive immigration reform, what are the pillars, whether civil rights is part of that. I mean, personally, I would say that the definition of what they mean by comprehensive is not my understanding of comprehensive, because comprehensive to me would be about renegotiating NAFTA, dealing with international debt. We'd be looking at larger issues about why a wall is not going to solve the problem, So, and I think a lot of us that work in enforcement issues have come to understand that CIR, as it's called, comprehensive immigration reform, means some legalization but more enforcement. And that's a problematic thing. We think there's already too much enforcement. So, I mean, that's me spouting. I can talk more about that. But you all want to say something about the pillars?
Well, the problem with immigration is, it's been tweaked so many different ways. You have, say, and it's very unfair who we let in and who we don't let in. For one, there is the Cuban policy that has the wet foot, dry foot. A lot of them do come through Mexico, because once they have their foot on U.S. soil, all they have to say is that they're Cuban, and they're let in. They're given a legal permanent citizenship. There have been others in the sense of Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, and they're also have been given the same provision. So the problem is that we kind of, it's not very known, but it was right. It was passed right after the 1996 bill. No, not as much. But the thing is that what happens is that it still has a major effect. So the thing, and then you also have to talk about education. And when you talk about education, you cannot leave out immigration. I think one of the solutions that I feel that needs to be done is a moratorium. But after that, we must have another task force. I really believe the president should have another task force to address this. And if not, then I think each individual state needs to address this issue, particularly in Texas, when you have border communities that are very different and have very different ideas than, say, in Dallas or in Houston. And so when people from Dallas and Houston are saying, well, lock them up. In Harris County, once you go into trial, believe me, they have the highest prosecution rate in all of Texas. And so the thing is, but in the border, border crossing is natural. People come in and out, but you don't want to ruin their economies. NAFTA was a godsend to them. They prospered, but yet at the same time, you look at the Midwestern states, and NAFTA was hell on them. Unemployment is all high. So we really need to have a true task force dealing with everything from economics to healthcare to education to civil rights.
Is there any other?
Just to give you a little bit of just a quick sense of the increased enforcement in a comprehensive immigration reform bill. In its latest iteration, Senator Schumer has recommended everyone must get biometric cards, and these can be used to then work. They're also proposing that undocumented immigrants on this path to citizenship have to plead guilty to what they're defining as kind of an infraction. But you're already seeing not only a criminalization and an acknowledgement that this is where basically we were wrong in coming over, etc. But really a lot of privacy issues and really racial profiling, civil rights concerns, absolutely. So it's a very complex issue.
Yeah, just with respect to the legal parts of the immigration reform, I think I just sort of thought of a few things that I think should be a part of it. One is that there needs to be a broad repeal of IRA, the 1996 laws. And that was such a damaging, it shifted the legal landscape almost to the point where it doesn't matter what the executive policy is, because they still have to deal with that too. We need to have a right to counsel, a right to have lawyers in immigration proceedings. 3, as we saw in the film, there needs to be the ability of immigration judges to take individual circumstances into account. And 4, there needs to be a meaningful and open appeals process, because judges do make mistakes, and that the appeals process needs to be meaningful, and that people should be able to remain free from detention while these processes go forward, in order for them to continue taking care of their families and contributing to their families.
Great, thanks. Are there any more questions? Yeah, sorry.
Currently, it's an administrative procedure, so therefore it's not in the U.S. court system.
I'm sorry? What
It's not in
is?
the court system now, it's just an administrative system now?
Yes.
Yeah. In the back, do you have a question? Madeline?
Very complicated problem. They don't know the value. For example,
That's great. Thank you very much. I think that was a great closing statement for our workshop. I mean, what Metalou was saying is that July 29th, I'd like to end with action steps for each of you, because you've learned something today, or you've gotten more insights on something you already knew something about. But I would urge you to do something on July 29th. Don't buy anything. Write about this on your blogs. Tweet about it. July 29th is next Thursday, and to support what's happening in Arizona against this unjust law and laws like it around the country. Also, the first week of August, Detention Watch Network, you should connect with our campaign about how you can be pushing the administration back on the way they enforce immigration laws. Anybody else have any other action items? I'm personally interested in how we can get more folks in every nation to care about this issue, but I'm so happy that so many of you came today and really showed your interest and your concern about this issue, and it's a real testament that you took this time to come with us and stick around even late. But do you have an announcement or do you have a question? That's another way you can get involved, is in your local community to do something to stop that. Did you have an announcement or what?
I got us, what would you say, an action plan.
Okay.
There's a lot of folks that are also residential aliens that have been here for more than 20, 30 years that have never really taken the time to look into citizenship. So then the reality is trying to focus on the residential aliens that are already here that have documents that can be able to
So if you know anybody who is a green card holder who's eligible for citizenship, urge them to become a citizen so that they can vote and vote some of these people out of office who are passing these laws. So thank you very much. Thanks so much to our panel. And have a great time.